I see you moving all over the place.
Yeah.
I think people want people to talk to you.
Oh, cool.
And supporting a small place. You do the big place, but to come to a
This is where it's at. This is where you can have a conversation, connect with people, eyeball to eyeball. This is where we want to do it. Yeah. Thanks for doing this. Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, we're going to grab this picture and we're going to get started. You ready?
Yes.
All right.
Excuse us. Yep.
This way.
But you know what? Kind of the sun's over there. Yeah.
Yes. Yay. Your face too well. There you go.
All right.
Oh, I should take it.
There you go. Right
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, can I get a picture of you and
Yeah.
Beto for the journaling guy?
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jake.
Thanks for making me look good.
We're going to follow Ted.
All right, here we go. Here we go.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Here we go. Oh, really? Thank you. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good
Thanks.
luck.
Grateful.
Selfie, sir. Thank you.
There you go. There you go. Thank you very much.
Can I get one?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
Beto, this thank you so much.
We got that guy. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
Nice
Thank you
to
for
meet you as
coming.
well.
This is Brian. He's the head of the
Congressman's guy. Just
Hampton Roads Young Dems.
Right on.
young Dan.
Got it, Ryan.
Thank you, Alice. You're the best.
Right on.
I'm going to put this into my brother UT.
I know, Ryan.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you very much.
Be super quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get in there, Sue.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks for being. Yeah, let's do it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I just want to shake your hand.
Thanks so much.
I want one because I'm a fellow.
Okay. Yes.
Make everyone jealous.
Right on.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it. Very grateful.
About to get started.
Thank you very much. Hi. Thanks for being here. I'm great. How are you doing? Sure. Very good. You know what? I think we should turn this way because the sun is...
This way?
Yeah, just come out to this way.
There we go.
All right, you ready? Over here. 1, 2, and 3. There you go. Got it? All right, you're next.
Oh, sorry, come on in. Come on in. Can we go
Okay.
together?
Over here. Look at me.
Okay.
1, 2. Everybody look over here. Look over here. 1, 2, 3. There you go. All right.
All right.
My daughter's a first-time voter.
All right on. Counting on you.
All right. We're going to get started. We're going to keep moving. All right,
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you being. Hi. How are you? Thanks for having us out. Oh, thank you.
Let's keep moving. Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Got it?
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Hey, thank you for having us out.
I'm from El
Fine,
Paso.
thank you. All right, thank you very much.
You would miss you in El Paso.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to get started now.
We got to get inside. I'm so sorry.
All right, we got to
Thank
keep
you very much.
moving now.
Appreciate it. Here we go.
All right.
Hey, thank you for coming out. Thank you very much. Hey, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Delegate Jones.
Yeah, we gotta go in with him, yep.
Well, good morning, Norfolk. How you feel out there today? Well, thank you guys for coming. I want to welcome you guys to the city of Norfolk and to the 89th District. I'm so happy that you guys are all here. But before I start, I want to have everybody give a big thank you and a round of applause to Ted Warren, the owner of Ted. I have known Ted for a long time. I have done some things in here, but it's never been this size. But we're all happy to have everybody here at the standing room only event, and I really have a wonderful honor this morning, and that's to introduce the guy standing behind me. You guys know him, but I will give you a little bit of background. You guys know he's from El Paso. The second best state in the country behind Virginia. That's right, that's right. He served on city council, he served in Congress. I think what is the most sort of enlightening thing to me about this guy is that he really takes it to the people. He held town halls every week. When he was on the city council, when he was in Congress, he was doing the same thing. And when he was running for the Senate last year, he visited all 254 counties in Texas, which is no small feat. So please give him a round of applause. But I think the thing that also sticks out to me is that, you know, young voter turnout surged by 500% last year when he was running in Texas. And as a guy who's 30 years old, I can really appreciate that. But what I really am most excited about is that he is here today in Virginia in 2019. Because as you guys well know, we have elections in November. We have the opportunity to flip the House of Delegates and flip the Senate of Virginia and put the control with the Democrats. And we have this opportunity to lock in a lasting progressive agenda for years to come, and that's what's at stake this year. And the attention that we get this year is going to be second to none, and that's why it's going to take all of us to get behind our candidates and make sure that they get to where they need to be. But we're not going to get there without the help from people like Beto O'Rourke. And I'm so happy and so proud to have him in Norfolk, Virginia. And without further ado, Beto O'Rourke.
Good morning. Y buenos días. I heard my friends from El Paso right over here in this section. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for welcoming us. To Charlie's, to the staff here, to Ted, thanks for opening up your doors, hosting all these great people here in Norfolk, in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Our first full day of campaigning here. The first presidential candidate to come to the Commonwealth of Virginia. And here we are. This is the first event. We considered, but we will decline, the Charlie's challenge of 12 eggs and 10 pancakes. It reminds us of the Big Texan in Amarillo, 72-ounce steak. If you can eat it within an hour, along with the baked potato, the salad, and the roll, you get it for free and you have bragging rights forever after. I understand Charlie's challenge is something like that. And I asked Ted, how many people have tried to do this over the years? He said about 180, and only 12 have succeeded, which may roughly be the odds of any one of us who are contending for the Democratic nomination right now. So, possible, but it's going to be a challenge. It's going to take everything that we've got. But thank you all for making some time for us and coming out on this morning, not just to greet a stranger from far west Texas in El Paso, but also to participate in your democracy. Not just for the 2020 election, as important as that is, but as Jay just pointed out, you have an historic election this year in your Commonwealth. You will decide the future. You will decide the future of Virginia, and by extension, the future of this country on so many critically important issues. Your Commonwealth just passed Medicaid expansion, ensuring that so many more can see a doctor, afford their prescriptions, take their child to a therapist, be well enough to learn at school, or be well enough to go to work, or to start a business like this one, to write poetry, sing in a punk rock band on this stage. Whatever you were put on this planet to do, Virginia now says that we want you to be well enough to do it. And that's in large part thanks to local heroes like Jay Jones, who stepped up, ran for office, and made the difference as a delegate, representing your interests and the interests of your fellow Virginians. So, Jay, thank you for what you're doing, for what you've done, for what you will do going forward. We are grateful. But as we know, the challenges before us are great. The progress that we have secured can be overturned and reversed. We've seen that all over this country. This morning, in Virginia Beach, we had a great run with somebody who's a candidate for your state senate. Missy Cotter Smazel, who's gonna win with your help. You guys behind her? You all behind Missy? Yeah, we need her to win. I asked her why she was running. She talked about the fact that she is the mother to a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. And she's deeply concerned about gun violence in our country, the potential for more of it in this state. She wants to do everything that she can beyond what she has already done. Retired from the United States Navy, a small business owner, a mother of 2, doing everything she can in civic life. She understands at this moment it is not enough. And it is not lost on me that almost to the minute, we are 12 years from one of the worst massacres in United States history, here in the state of Virginia. 32 lives taken, and yet this state still does not have universal background checks to ensure that everyone who wants to purchase or acquire a firearm, we perform the due diligence and vetting necessary to ensure if they are going to be a danger to themselves or to someone else, that we ensure that they do not have that firearm. To keep ourselves, to keep them and this country safe. A country that loses more than 30,000 of our fellow Americans every year. No other country comes close to this level of bloodshed.
Get it done like New Zealand.
And we can assume that this is inherent to who we are, that we are violent, we are evil, we are bad, this is our lot in life. Or we can understand that this is a human-caused problem with a human solution to it. If Virginia is going to pass universal background checks, then we need Missy in your Senate. All of us have to work our tails off in this next election to make sure that she's elected. Literally, she will tip the balance of power in that upper chamber and allow us to make progress on these and other issues. This is going to be our defining moment of truth this year, right now. Think about the challenges before us. It's not just gun violence. It's not just expanding Medicaid. It is a country where millions of our fellow Americans cannot see a doctor or afford prescription medication or be able to get mental health care help. The wealthiest, the most powerful country on the face of the planet, the most medically and technologically advanced. We do not lack for resources. We just have not yet found the political will to make the progress that we need. So if we are going to achieve universal, guaranteed, high-quality health care for every single American in a country where we still have people in 2019 dying of diabetes and the flu and curable cancers, it means every single one of us can see a primary care provider, can afford our prescriptions, have premiums that are affordable and deductibles that are bridgeable. It means that in a country where one of the largest providers of mental health care services is the county jail system, to the point that those with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and clinical depression far too often are getting arrested on purpose to go to the one place they are guaranteed the help that they need, the prescription to the psychotropic medication that makes life bearable for them, if only temporarily, before they are out on the streets again. Universal care means everyone has access to mental health care. And in the midst of a maternal mortality crisis, 3 times as deadly for women of color in this country, universal care means every woman makes her own decisions about her own body and has access to the care to ensure that she can. If we think about this country, comprised of the people of the planet, unlike so many other nations, we are not defined by race or ethnicity, but we are defined by an ideal 243 years and counting, that we are, all of us, created equal to equal opportunity. And though we have not fulfilled this promise or those words so many decades and centuries since our founding, all of us are doing our best, focused on making it happen right now. This country, comprised of those who can trace their family line back 10,000 years, their ancestors crossing the Bering Strait to be where we are right now. Those who can trace their ancestry back to the Middle Passage. Their ancestors kidnapped in West Africa, brought here to literally build the wealth of this country in which they would not share. There are those who fled persecution, crushing poverty, certain death and violence or famine, as did the O'Rourkes in the 19th century from Ireland. All of them came here to this country. And the very source of our strength and our success, and yes, our security and our safety, is to acknowledge it. So when you see people arrive at our front door at the Texas-Mexico border, after having walked or ridden atop a train, not inside of it, known as the Beast or La Bestia, fleeing the deadliest places on the planet today, doing what you would do or what I would do if faced with the same set of conditions, if it were the only way that Amy and I could save the lives of Ulysses and Molly and Henry, our 3 kids, we would make that journey as well. That's a journey that has been made millions of times over, across the oceans, across our connections to the rest of the world, to make America great. And yet, those families, at their most desperate and vulnerable moment, that child for whom that mother has literally risked her life, taken from her arms by force, by us, though it were the decision of one man from one party, as long as we are a democracy, and the people are the government, and the government is the people, then it's on every single American, including those who are standing here today, that mother deported back to the very country from which she fled, that child caged, turned over to HHS or the Office of Refugee Resettlement, or placed in a foster care home, God literally only knows where. That child, that mother, today having no idea where the other is, and even if they are lucky enough to be reunited, we've been there at some of those reunions, and there are no smiles on that kid's face, no tears of joy, no impatience to tell their mother what they have just been through. The impatience that I see on my 8-year-old son's face when I return from the road. There is a vacant expression, an inability to connect emotionally, because I would assume that child associates their mother with the worst pain and suffering and torture that a human being can endure, and she will not open herself up to it again, at least not anytime soon. So, if we are going to live our values and our ideals and our foundational principles in this country, we will guarantee that we never again take another child from another mother or father who has made this journey, that we honor our asylum laws, our traditions, our understanding of who we are, that we reunite all of those families as soon as humanly possible, and that we take this as an opportunity to rewrite this country's immigration laws, Republicans and Democrats and independents alike, in our own image, to reflect the diversity and the strength of communities like Norfolk, like El Paso, like the United States of America. This is our opportunity to free every dreamer, more than 1 million strong in this country, from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens here in the place that they're already contributing so much to. Bring their parents out of the shadows, the original dreamers. Millions more working jobs that are the toughest, sometimes not even paid a minimum wage, held in some cases in modern day bondage, unable to freely contribute to their maximum potential, to this country's maximum greatness. Let's bring them in. Let's allow them to get right with this government. And then let's make sure that they have a path to earn citizenship, to making sure that they fully participate in this economy, our democracy, and the success of our communities. That is something we can do together. Listening to Missy while we were just running right now along the shore, absolutely beautiful. I said, you know, beyond gun violence, beyond the quality of public school education, and making sure that in a state that pays our public school educators $9,000 less than just the average across the United States, beyond investing in those world-class educators, making sure that we make investments in public education, in public safety, reducing gun violence. Tell me what keeps you up at night. She said every single time it rains now in our community, it floods now in our community. This is a story that I am hearing all over the United States of America. 58 inches of rain fell from the sky in Houston, Texas, in my home state. It is the landfall record for as long as we have been keeping them in North America, and it was the third 500-year flood in just the last 5 years, meaning that Houstonians had just begun to repair the damage from the last storm when the next one hit them. And so many of them are unable to stay in their homes going forward. Too many of them lost their lives during Harvey. Storms like that one, storms like those that you have seen here, are in part a product of our own emissions, our own excesses, and in the face of science and the facts and the truth, our own inaction. But those scientists who predict more storms, more flooding, who underscore that their very ability to live in Virginia Beach or Norfolk or Houston or in the desert Southwest is compromised by the trajectory that we are on right now, or who say if you're worried about 400,000 apprehensions at the US-Mexico border, those fleeing crushing poverty and violence in Central America, wait until some countries, including those in Central America, can no longer support human life, because that's exactly our future on this course. Those scientists say that though everything will get worse if we do not change, they tell us there is still time to make that change. In fact, they tell us there are 10 years, 1 decade left to humanity, to all of us. If there were ever a reason to stand up, to be counted, to run for office, to support those who do, it is now this time for that reason. If we can release ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, if we can invest in renewable energy like wind and solar, which by the way creates the jobs that are employing so many of our fellow Americans, the two fastest growing occupations today, wind and solar in the United States. If we can bring in rural communities, allow farmers to do their part as they wish to do, allow them to make a profit by planting cover crops that pull more of that carbon out of the air, open up technologies like precision tilling, which disturb less of the carbon that is in the soil. In other words, if every single one of us does our part, and this country sets the example, we can then take our rightful place as the indispensable nation on the global stage and not just sign back up to the Paris climate agreements, though we must. We can also convene the powers of this planet, including China, which has 3 to 4 times the number of coal-fired plants than does the United States, to make sure that we are all pulling in the same direction, and that at this defining moment of truth, we are not found wanting. But these kind of challenges, whether it is healthcare, whether it is immigration, whether it is public education, whether it is an economy that works for everyone so that you only have to work 1 job instead of 2 or 3 jobs right now, or whether it is confronting climate change before it is too late, we will not be able to do this by half measures, and we will not be able to do this with only half the country. It cannot just be Democrats. It cannot just be big cities. It cannot just be some part of America. It has got to be all of America. And I'll tell you from my experience, living in a reliably red state, representing my community on the city council and in Congress, never trimming my sails, always moving forward with a bold, progressive agenda, whether it was on the El Paso City Council in 2009, ensuring that we extended health care benefits to the same-sex partners of city employees, though there were recall elections and blowback politically for that. Whether it was arguing that we needed to end the war on drugs, which had become a war on people, which had produced the largest prison population on the face of the planet, disproportionately comprised of people of color, we were able to move forward, find common ground and agreement, and make progress. And in Congress, every single year that I was there, of the 6 years I served in the minority, we were still able to make progress, expanding mental health care for veterans at a time that 20 of them a day, every single day, are taking their lives. And the majority of those who died were unable or unwilling to get into the VA. So opening up more care means more appointments, means less wait times, means better outcomes and more lives saved. We do that with Republicans and Democrats alike. And then, just campaigning across the state of Texas, going to every one of the 254 counties, no matter how red, no matter how blue, no matter how big, no matter how small, because everyone is deserving of respect, of being heard, listened to, fought for, and served. Though we didn't win the election, we gained more votes than any Democrat in the history of the state of Texas. We were able to help great candidates like Jay and Missy to win their races. 2 long-held Republican seats in Congress, now occupied by Democrats. The composition of our state legislature has changed for the better, and 17 African-American women elected to judicial positions in Harris County changing the face of criminal justice. In other words, we got to be part of building a movement of Democrats for sure, a movement of young people. Voter turnout in that group was up 500% in the last election, but also a movement of independents and Republicans. 500,000 of my fellow Texans voted for one of the most conservative governors we've ever had, and also voted for us in the last election. And yet on that campaign trail, we talked about universal health care, we talked about gun safety, we talked about immigration reform, and we talked about climate change. There's far more that unites us in this country if we will only ensure that the president that we have right now, who seeks to scare us and divide us, keep us apart, keep us angry, and keep us afraid, if that kind of politics does not dominate this country, and instead we define ourselves by our aspirations, our ambitions, the work, the creativity, the service, and the sacrifice that we're willing to bring to bear in order to achieve them. If we do that, then this country will be up to each and every challenge. And that's why I'm here today, to run to serve you as the next president of the United States of America. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to join you. Thank you all for having us out. We'd love to take your questions, your comments, your suggestions, your ideas. Cynthia Connell's got a microphone. If you raise your hand, she'll do her best to bring it to you. And we got some questions outside as well.
Hi, we love you here in Virginia. Yes! I want to ask you a question. What would you say to every black woman in Virginia to get our vote?
Thank you for being here. First of all, I'll tell you that I'm here to follow your lead. I came to introduce myself, to share with you what I believe in, but to listen, to learn, to understand, to follow, and to help bring people together. I mentioned some of the challenges that are unique to women of color in this country. A rate of maternal mortality that is 3 times greater than white women. When you look at rates of infant mortality, the disparity is even worse. Between black families and white families in the United States of America right now, it is worse than it was in 1850, 15 years before the abolition of slavery. I mentioned the criminal justice system that disproportionately confines people of color. So many for possession of marijuana, which is legal or decriminalized or medicinalized in most states of this country. And yet we're locking people up right now who, when released, will be forced to check a box on every employment application form, will no longer be eligible for student loans. We've got to change that system of justice, but we also have to acknowledge that it's not just criminal justice. It is not just healthcare. It's an economy where there's 10 times the wealth in white America today that there is in black America today. And that did not happen by accident. It happened by design. Texas, before our election, 50th in voter turnout in the United States of America. Why? We were drawn that way by our state legislature. African American women and men drawn out of a congressional district based on their race or their ethnicity. Their vote diminished in the process, and fewer of them were showing up because they understood exactly what was happening. So in order to transcend that, it will be no one person and no one party. As we saw in Alabama, as we have seen in Virginia, as I just saw in Texas, it is African American women in the vanguard of these campaigns, these elections, and these movements to change the composition of our legislature to ensure that they reflect the genius of our country. So you've got my commitment to follow your lead to change these conditions so that they are better for everybody. Thank you for being here. Appreciate that.
Hi, my name's Darlene. I'm an organizer with Planned Parenthood, and my question is in regards to LGBT rights. In this state, I can be fired from my job for being queer. In this state, I can be discriminated against when I try to rent an apartment. I would love to hear concrete steps that you would take if you were to be president on how I can be free and face an equal life, an equal existence in this state.
Thank you for being here. We mentioned at the outset this foundational principle of our country around which we are supposedly organized, that we are all created equal. And we're supposed to receive equal treatment, that no person is above or below the law, But as you just described in Virginia, that's not the experience. In Texas, you can also be fired based on your sexual orientation. In Texas, which recently had 30,000 kids in the foster care system, and Child Protective Services was so underfunded and understaffed that kids were sleeping in the CPS offices, like on the desks, under the desks. And in Texas, you can be too gay to adopt one of those kids who needs a home by state law. In Texas, it is a defense in a court of law if you have killed somebody who came onto you because they are the same sex. In Texas, we just seriously debated a bathroom bill that sought to scare parents about transgender kids coming into their kids' bathroom, though we know that transgender kids are more likely to be the victims and the perpetrators of any attacks taking place anywhere in this country. We have a president right now who has turned his back on the service and sacrifice of transgender service members. Countless have served, sacrificed, lost their lives, saved the lives of others. And yet in the face of that, he dishonors their commitment and the best traditions of this country. How do we meet these challenges? In part, it is how we talk about one another, never demeaning or diminishing or bringing people down, but expecting the best out of each and every single one of us. But we also have to codify that in our laws. And so as president, I will sign the Equality Act, which guarantees the full civil rights of every single American, regardless of their sexual orientation or their declared gender. So you've got my commitment on that, to speak about it, but also to ensure that we change our laws to reflect it. Thank you for being here.
Okay, I'm right here in the middle, a little bit weird.
There you go.
Hi, my name's Carl. I am a field organizer with LCV. So I've been working on elections since 2016, and my question is that I talked to a lot of people who felt disenfranchised by Hillary Clinton's message in 2016, and they either did a protest vote or they didn't vote. So my question would be, like, how would you win back those who felt disenfranchised by Hillary Clinton and those who felt further on the left, essentially?
Right. Yeah. Listen, without comparing myself to any other candidate, I can just tell you that any success that I've been part of has been based on showing up and listening to people like we're doing here today. On city council for 6 years, I held a town hall like this every single week. In Congress, every single month. All comers welcome, no holds barred. Anyone could come out, and they did. Criticize me, ask a question, suggest some of the ideas that became legislation, bills that we introduced. I was a far better representative for listening to those who disagreed with me, or had an idea that I wasn't able to come up with on my own, or that my staff did not either. We campaigned the same way, not only going to every one of the 254 counties of Texas, including King County, that voted for President Trump something like 96% in the last election. So red you can see it glowing from outer space as you're orbiting the Earth. But when we go to very red places, talking about gun safety, talking about a woman's right to choose, talking about universal health care, talking about dreamers, talking about our common values, showing up and listening to a Republican school teacher who says, if you take my tax dollars out of my classroom, turn them into a voucher, send them to a private school, she said, mark my words, I will hunt you down. I will find you and I will get you. Only by showing up and listening to her did we find that we had common cause, stood on common ground, and that I could become her candidate going forward. So I think what I'm trying to say to you is that without trimming our sails, or compromising ourselves, or changing what we believe in, or poll testing a single thing that we say, and I never have, we should be able to show up everywhere for everyone. The first event on the first day of the campaign was in southeastern Iowa, in a community called Keokuk. Voted for Barack Obama nearly 60% in 2008. Voted for Donald Trump by nearly the same margin in 2016. I will presume nothing about the people of Keokuk. I'm not going to take them for granted, and I'm not going to write them off. I'm going to show up, introduce myself as I did with you today, and then listen to them about what is on their minds. And the things that I heard mirror what I'm hearing in other parts of the country. I think the first question was from a woman who says, my daughter's copay, this is after insurance kicks in, to refill her prescription is $444. It is unaffordable. What are we going to do about this, Beto? Did not ask her, are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? Who did you vote for last time? Who will you vote for next time? We just talked about a solution that would ensure that we can address that. So listen, we're going to have the courage of our convictions. We're also going to listen to and learn from people, and we are going to show up everywhere. I do not think there is another candidate for the Democratic nomination who has visited as many cities as we have, red and blue, rural and urban, who's taken as many questions as we have, who has brought as many people into the conversation as we are doing right now. So that's the way that we're going to meet this challenge right now. Appreciate the question.
I'm over here to your left. Right here.
Hi, my name's Finn. Live here in Norfolk. My question is regarding healthcare. In the last 3 years, I've had to undergo 4 surgeries. I just recently had to file bankruptcy because I haven't been able to return to work due to chronic pain issues. We had to file bankruptcy because I had, after good insurance, had $20,000 in medical bills from the result of 4 surgeries. So what is your actual solution to that kind of problem? And in addition to that, the good insurance costs us, through an employer, $12,000 a year for 2 people.
Yeah. Yeah. We were in Texas campaigning and met a woman who said that her out-of-pocket costs monthly are $10,000. She has insurance. And I said, how do you afford that? And she said, I don't. Something at some point is going to give. Her ability to pay the note on her mortgage, the roof over her head, literally, food on the table, or those medications. Met someone whose prescription drug costs are $10,000 out of pocket a year. She's supposed to take 3 pills a day of that prescription. She takes 1 or 2 to see if she can extend the life of them. You may have just read a cover story in USA Today about a nurse who died of diabetes. Now, this is a medical provider who is taking care of those with diabetes, who is administering their insulin, something that was invented nearly 100 years ago by scientists who sold it for $3 Canadian to the University of Toronto so that it could save people's lives. And now there are corporations who are making obscene profits on this right now. So how do we meet the challenge that you just described for you? Potential bankruptcy or the inability to afford the care that you need to be here with us right now and to continue to live to your potential? A couple of ideas. 1, every other state, including mine, should follow the lead of yours by expanding Medicaid. Too many people make too much to afford to enroll, but do not make enough to afford private insurance. 2, we should allow the federal government, which buys prescription medications for Medicare, Medicaid, VA, military retiree, federal employee beneficiaries, to use its leverage and its purchasing power to bring down the costs of pharmaceuticals so that everybody can afford them. 3, immediately expand Medicare to every single American who does not have insurance today, and to every American who has insurance but cannot afford the insurance they have. Literally make this a choice for every single one of us. If you're an employer, if you're Ted and at Charlie's and you are on an employer-sponsored plan and you want to keep that because your employees like it, because you like it, that's fine. If you want to move off your private insurance plan and get on to Medicare, that's even better. And what we do is invest in Medicare so that it becomes the insurer of choice for our fellow Americans. It is the quickest and the surest way to get to guaranteed, universal, high-quality health care for everyone. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
We have time for a few months.
I'll get you after this one. After this one, Connor, I'm going to hand the microphone to her. Yeah.
Hi, I'm a sophomore at Gravy High School.
Thanks for being here.
Well, my question is really like your response to Congresswoman like Ilhan Omar and how she was marginalized and targeted by the President of the United States, and also the silence of the Democratic Party on her behalf.
Yeah.
What's your response to that?
Yeah, so thank you for being here and for the question, and to make sure that everyone heard it or is up to speed. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, just elected to represent a district in Minnesota, happens to be a Muslim member of Congress as well. And, sorry, I've got somebody on the microphone. Sorry, this one got turned off and it should have been that one. There we go. The president just last week tweeted a video that shows Congresswoman Omar speaking and then conflates her speech with images of the 9/11 terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers. And it ends with this chilling message, we will never forget. And what it does is it incites violence against Representative Omar. It incites violence against Muslim Americans. And it reminds us that the president's rhetoric, his words, do not just offend our sensibilities or our norms or our ears. They also provoke actions and policies and practices that we should all be ashamed of. When the president calls Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals, when a third grader in my hometown who happens to be Mexican American, a little girl, says, "Why does the president not like me?" I can only imagine what that does to her head, her conception of herself, and who she's going to be in this country. When I repeat that story in Houston, Texas, a family pulls me aside and they say, "Our third grade daughter asked us the same question because she's Muslim." And though we've been here for generations, and it wouldn't matter to me if they hadn't, but though they've been there for generations, she wonders if they should be in another country. We may not get the best out of her. She doesn't think that she belongs here. Putting kids in cages follows a president who describes asylum seekers as an infestation. It's not a word that I've heard an American president use to describe human beings. It's a word that you might have expected during the Third Reich to describe other human beings. The idea that we would keep out all people of one religion from this country that is comprised of people from all traditions of faith and walks of life. The day on which he signed the Muslim ban in February of 2017, a mosque in Victoria, Texas, in my home state, was burned to the ground. Hate crimes in this country are up every single one of the last 3 years. So you're right to ask this question, and we are right to speak out against it, but also to offer an alternative. To once again demonstrate that this country is stronger and better when everyone is welcomed and included. We don't just tolerate or even respect our differences, but we embrace them. El Paso, Texas, one half of the largest binational community in the hemisphere, 3 million from 2 different countries, joined, not separated by the Rio Grande River, form something far greater, far more powerful than the sum of the parts, or the people in El Paso is one of, for 20 years running, the safest cities in the United States of America. Not despite the fact that we're a city of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees, but because we are a city of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees. So we lose this at our peril. And this president is trying to lose this as fast as he possibly can. It adds urgency not just to speaking out, but to organizing, to ensuring that whoever our nominee is come the summer of 2020, that each of us do all that we can to get behind her or him to defeat Donald Trump and to bring this country together in January of 2021. Thank you for the question.
Hello, my name is and I'm going to be voting for the first time in the 2024 election as well. How do you, what specific plans do you have for, to help, slow down global warming?
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Thanks for asking the question. I'm reminded by your presence and the question that just preceded you that for any historic change, it has been led by young people. You think about World War II, the greatest generation, coming out of the greatest depression this country had ever faced, stifling, crushing poverty. And yet it was 17, 18, 19-year-olds storming those beaches on Normandy on D-Day, so many of them paying the ultimate price for this country. You think about those who marched for civil rights, those who gave their lives for civil rights, the Freedom Riders on those Greyhound buses in the Deep South, having the audacity to use the bathroom of their choice or the water fountain of their choice. You think about those who crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge with John Lewis. You think about the Greensboro Forum. We were just in Greensboro yesterday. 1960 shocked the conscience of the country. Students, the Friendship 9 in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Those in every part of the Deep South and the former Confederacy who were willing to risk their lives so often were students, your age or a little bit older, who forced the change. And though we give LBJ, and listen, I'm a Texan and I'm proud of him as anybody else, we give him credit for the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. Though he signed them into law, though his legislative prowess did not hurt, it was young people who forced the change on that issue. And now that we face the existential challenge of all existential challenges, climate change, where if we do not make the necessary decisions now, your generation and the generations that follow will bear the brunt of the consequences. We've got to have your leadership, your urgency, your passion on this. The specific steps that we take to free ourselves from fossil fuels. First day, we can reinstitute the Clean Power Plan that ensures that we generate more of our electricity from renewable energy resources. We can follow the lead of Texas, my home state. It generates more wind power than any other state in the union. I think 4 times what the second place state does. Right now, my hometown of El Paso, Texas, one of the sunniest places on the planet. We're building out utility scale solar right now. I mentioned allowing rural communities and farmers through the Farm Bill to be incentivized so that they can make a profit to do their part to capture some of that carbon out of the air. We need to get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions as soon as humanly possible. If we do not, we will have failed you, the generations that will follow you. So I'm going to do everything I can with everyone in this country to make sure that we are not found wanting at this moment of truth. Thank you for the question. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Beto, welcome. Everybody wants to know who can go toe-to-toe with Trump. And I think that it's you. I think that Trump is scared to death of you. And I'm saying to you, don't back down because you got it. I'm looking at it. I saw it when you were in Texas. They cheated you. They cheated you. And Trump is scared to death of everything about you. Intellectually, your youth, your handsome appearance, he's afraid of all of it. He's scared of being like you. And I want you to knock him down.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I can't count how many events we've had in the month and half a week that we've been on the trail. This is the first time that anyone has brought a tambourine to this. And I want a tambourine at every single event going forward. It makes it so much better than it otherwise would be. You're right. You're right. We've got to defeat Donald Trump in November of 2020. We've got to do it in a way that does not further divide this country so that we can come together January of 2021 to meet each and every single one of these challenges. So I'm counting on you just like you're counting on me. Thank you for being here. Very, very grateful. Yes.
Student and as a member of the younger generation, I'm worried about how high the national debt is getting and how that is going to fall on us later on. So what can we do that can help decrease it or get it under control?
Thank you for the great question. So my kids are 12, 10, and 8. And I wonder when they're my age, in the 2050s, and they're looking back on us in 2019, the kind of questions that they're going to have for me if I'm still alive. So you guys were $21 trillion in debt back in 2017 and 2018. And you had $4 trillion in outstanding infrastructure needs in this country. There was $1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debt. Millions of Americans who could get no health care whatsoever. And your response to that was a $2 trillion tax break that flowed to the wealthy at a time of historic wealth and income inequality, and to corporations who are already sitting on record piles of cash. Dad, please explain that one to me. So if we're going to meet this challenge of debt that has accrued from the 2 George W. Bush tax cuts, from 18 years of war in Afghanistan that has metastasized to war in Syria and Somalia and Yemen and Libya, if we're going to acknowledge that we've been in Iraq for 28 years, since 1991, through 6 successive presidential administrations that followed George H.W. Bush, we can begin to explain the debt that we hold right now and those Trump tax cuts. and the irresponsible spending on the part of the Republican majority that's adding $1 trillion a year in deficit spending, by the time that you are my age, just the service on that debt will cloud out any other investment that you want to make. So let's roll back the worst of those tax cuts. Let's ask corporations whose effective tax rate went from, or whose tax rate went from 35% to 21%, to pay a little bit more of their fair share. Maybe not back to 35, but if you raised it to the mid-20s, you would generate hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years that you could invest in our priorities as a country. Let's end these wars that we are in all over the world and bring those service members back home to this country, to this community, to their families. Let's invest in the infrastructure of America, in our communities, in education. Let's wipe clean your student loan debt if you are accruing it right now. If you're willing to work in public service, teaching, being at the VA, something your community needs. These are the decisions, the choices that we have before us. And I want to make sure that we are making them together. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it.
This is our last question.
Hi, thank you for being here. So, there's a piece of legislation that keeps getting killed in the General Assembly, the ERA. It was a bipartisan legislation, and it sought to end the legal distinctions in men and women in terms of property, employment, and marriage. So my question to you is, as president, how would you protect women's rights? Because right now, we are not insured under the Constitution.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking the question, for being here, and for your advocacy. Still in this country, we began with this premise that we were all created equal, to equal opportunity. So many justifiably see that as a lie in their lives. Disparate opportunities, disparate outcomes. For women in this country, they're still paid a fraction of what men are paid for the same work, the same number of hours, the same value provided at the job. So making sure that we have full equal pay in this country. Banning effectively and fully any discrimination in the workplace. Ensuring that all are treated with dignity and respect, that that's just a value that we carry in the way that we act, but that it's also encoded in law, so we make sure that there are consequences for those who fail to do that. The disparity in healthcare amongst women, I talked about the maternal mortality crisis as just one challenge, or a Supreme Court who can effectively overturn Roe versus Wade, though it stood the test of time since 1973. We've seen the cost of that in Texas, where a quarter of our family planning clinics have been closed. And it's not just the legal access to an abortion that has been removed, but the ability to get a cervical cancer screening, or see a family planning provider, or just to see a doctor of any kind for women in a state that has yet failed to expand Medicaid, in addition to all of that, is disproportionately affecting women in Texas, around this country. So not only having those values, not only making those changes, but in an administration and a cabinet of ours, ensuring that women are at the forefront, that we reflect the diversity, the strength, the genius of this country in every position of public trust and power. This is the way that we begin to meet some of these challenges. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Grateful. Es todo. Quiero dar las gracias a todos por estar aquí con nosotros, darlos bienvenidos a nosotros del Paso. We would love to come back. We are grateful that we got to be here with you. Thank you to Ted. Thank you to Jay. Thanks to everyone who showed up. We are grateful. Gracias. Nos vemos. Bye-bye.